It's whiskey time. Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud for another wonderful Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada Outturn. This is Outturn number 140 for the month of June 2023. And if you are watching this either on or close to June the 3rd, the first Friday of the month, some of these might still be available to purchase. But I have to say the chances are relatively low because we didn't get much of these whiskies and they're almost already all sold out. We saved at least one, as is my promise, for the digital release at 10 a.m. on the first Friday of every month, the digital release of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here at the Strath Ale Wine and Spirit Merchants. But it's literally only one for the majority of these whiskies, I think, today. So if you like the look of any of these whiskies here in front of me, head to strathliquor.com/SMWS and hopefully there's a bottle still available for you there. And if you're having trouble deciding which one you like the look of, well, that's why I'm here. Yeah, I'm giving you my opinions of these whiskies and a reveal as to what they are and all the juicy details. So I guess without any further ado, let's get started with today's first whiskey. What are we starting with? Well, according to the booklet, we're starting with something that is wickedly vile and despicably dreadful. A stunning nose dominated by old-school medicinal ointments, furniture oils, herbaceous waxes, and a wee-studded note of kumquat, dried flowers, burlap, sweetened grist, petrichor, and flower honey. Magnificently charismatic, mature, and old-school. With water, we noted dandelion and burdock syrup, old mead, passion flower, crystallized exotic fruit chunks, and firwood resins. The neat palate opened with a wonderfully rich seam of medicines, herbal extracts, tea tree oils, aged orange peels, and exotic fruit trees. Some firmer oak spices in the background added body. Reduction balanced everything perfectly and revealed notes of manuka honey, unlit cigars, lime curds, dried tropical chunks, and beeswax furniture polish. In conclusion, a terrible dram, and one that you should definitely not purchase or indeed pay any attention to whatsoever. Reverse psychology. So, as you can see, this is it's already open. I've already done the Outturn preview tasting for the month, so I've tried these whiskies before. This is not a fresh bottle pop. I'm sorry for those who like those on YouTube, but instead you get a more fully thought out, well-rounded opinion by me, maybe. Definitely. And I have to say, this tasting was unbelievable. These 6 whiskies are all fabulous. But this first one was actually my pick of the entire tasting, which is super weird. It's a strange dram, and I'm gonna crack it open and nose it and let you know why it's a strange one. Yep. Yep. It's a strange one because it's from a distillery which is usually pretty well known for its light and floral characteristics. It's a distillery that is part of the Ballantine's blend, which is lauded for its sort of lighter body and more sort of springtime, summery style of whiskey. But this isn't anything like anything I've ever had from this distillery. And this is a true example of how single cask whiskey can be so incredibly varied, even from one distillery, even from one distillate. And I say that because I actually have right here, this is, so I'll go through the stats, shall I? This is 63.101. It's distilled on the 9th of May 2002. It's from Speyside, and it's first fill ex-bourbon barrel, aged 19 years, bottled at 54.1. Right here, I have 63.91. It is a 19-year-old distilled on the 9th of May 2002, distilled in Speyside from a first fill ex-bourbon barrel, and came out at 52.3. Yeah, I should also mention 188 bottles of this one, 174 of this one. This is a release from a few months ago, and these are sister casks. And I have never had sister casks be quite so different. It's incredible. I'm actually going to pour myself one of these right now so I can illustrate slightly with my words, I guess. This one is just, yeah, much more spring and summer. It's much more floral, candy floss, that kind of an idea. On paper, they shouldn't be that different, right? Pretty much everything about them is the same. They're from the same distillate, matured in the same place, we assume, for the same amount of time, in the same type of wood. Yeah. This one is much more lemon peel, maybe even lemongrass, like I said, a light sort of floral, like summer meadow daisies kind of a thing. Maybe a little mango, little melon. All sort of lighter, fruity, sugary kind of flavors. This one, well, it smells like it smells like you've taken those flavors and put them in a burlap sack and doused them in just a little bit of oil and left them in a cellar for 2 weeks. It's so different. It's so weird. I love it. I really love it. In fact, I even smell a little smoke on it, like really, really faintly. On the palate, it was there as well when I tried it on Sunday. And so the only time that I've had a whiskey that tastes like this, well, it's a very special whiskey because, and I actually filmed it as well. You can find me drinking it on this channel for the first time. Was the first time I ever had a Brora. This tastes like Brora, and that's weird. That's super weird. Oh. Yeah, this is a 19-year-old Glentockers that tastes like a 36-year-old Brora, and I don't understand it. It's super amazing. I love this whiskey. I will be surprised if it's not still my favorite at the end of this video as well, because I really, really love this whiskey. I can't overstate that fact. This is going to be one of those super memorable SMWS releases for me that I think about and talk about in future times. And to go in the Hall of Fame along with things like the War Seahorse and Dystopian Cyberman Lubricant and so many very, very beautiful whiskeys that I might still have little bits of heels on my shelf because I can't bring myself to finish the bottles. Oh, Thermonuclear Banana. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's been some incredible whiskeys. And that's one of the things I love about the SMWS is a lot of my favorite whiskeys that I've had from them are from distilleries or have statistics on the label that I wouldn't really necessarily have considered had I not had the opportunity to taste it. All right. I should taste the sister cask as well. Yeah. Light, approachable, fruity Speyside. Weird, bonkers, deep, complex Highland. And the smoke is definitely there. I cannot get my head around how different these two sister cask bottlings are. These are definitely not twins. I'll tell you that much. Yeah. All right. So what is Distillery 63? Well, it's a distillery that you might not have seen very often because it despite it's been around since the 1890s. I think it was 1898, which is actually a very popular year for new distilleries. There was a lot of distilleries founded in the late 1890s. But it only actually got an official bottling for the first time quite recently, in the last 10 years. And like I said, it's under the Ballantine's banner. And it's actually, the official bottling even had the Ballantine's name on it still, because they didn't think it would have enough, recognition, or it wouldn't be able to sell itself without the Ballantine's name on the label, which is kind of funny. It's Glentockers, and I love me a Glentockers. I've had some wonderful Glentockers from probably the most common place you'll find it, which is Gordon and MacPhail. But the SMWS is apparently coming out swinging with some great older Glentockers statements as well, which is nice to see. There is at least one bottle, perhaps only one, maybe two, actually. I'm not entirely sure. I think we actually gave a ticket out for one of these, and it didn't actually come and get claimed at the end of the night. So someone's mistake might be to your benefit. It is $310.35. And, honestly, if I'm being perfectly honest, based on the stats alone, that's on the more expensive side for a 19-year-old Speyside from a distillery that you might not recognize, right? But if you consider the fact that I haven't had tasting notes like this, I haven't had flavors like this, and an experience like this without spending over $3,000 on a 36-year-old brewer, that's a hell of a bargain. All right, so what am I actually finding? It's so deep. Like I said, canvas, like burlap, oily waxiness, which is what's bringing me to that brewer, with that light little undertone of dark smoke. It's almost like a smoky coffee kind of a flavor in the background. Yeah, it reminds me of the smell of an old museum somehow. I'm walking around Old Town over at the Victoria, the BC Museum over there. Yeah, it's just neat. Yeah, definitely coffee on the palate, and also Yorkshire pudding, but also sausage, which goes well with Yorkshire pudding and coffee, actually. It's a weird Yorkshire breakfast whiskey, this one. Yeah. Well, yeah. Honestly, I don't want to talk too much about it, because, again, I've only got 1 or 2 bottles to sell, and I'm currently doing the math in my head as whether I should get a bottle myself. So I don't want to sell it too much. Actually, to quote the SMWS on this, this is, what did they say? A terrible dram, and one that you definitely shouldn't purchase or indeed pay any attention to whatsoever, because I kind of want it. But available right now at the time of release at strathclyde.com/SMWS. All right, whiskey number 2 today. What do we got? We got Lip Smacking, Citric, and Summery. All right. The delicate, complex nose gave suede jackets, burlap, and tatami mats in the sun. Lemon balm, heathery hillsides and coconut, travel sweets and custard creams. The palate hit the fruit machine jackpot. Melons, nectarines, brambles, sherbet lemons, dried pineapple and papaya. Traces of wasabi peanuts on the finish. The reduced nose has us imagining a sunny wooden platform above a rainforest, sitting on hay bales, enjoying custard tarts. Charentes, I don't know that. I don't know this word. Charentes? It looks French. Some kind of melon. And Zinfandel Rosé. The palate was lip-smacking, citric and summery, waxed sweets, lemon sorbet, gooseberries, barley water, and Greek salad. Tobacco strands and tannic oat tingles to finish. Lovely. So, this is Distillery 1.257. It is an outturn of 234 bottles, distilled on the 13th of December 2012 and aged for 8 years. It's from the Speyside region and was placed into a second fill ex-bourbon barrel, coming out at 63.1% ABV. It's a Distillery 1. That's an important one. All right. Let's crack her open. Oop. So, this is a wonderful liquid from a distillery which doesn't like being named. And I'm going to do so because, frankly, technically this video is, this YouTube channel is owned by me and not the company, and I'm not worth much. So if they try and sue me, it's probably not worth their while. But this is This is a wonderful distillery that plays an integral part, of course, in the story of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. 40 years ago, Pip Hills discovered single cask whisky through this distillery. And now, 40 years later, we're trying something quite similar to what he actually got in the first place. I think his first cask might have actually been 8 years aged. It's interesting that this distillery doesn't like being part of this story. I have a theory, though. I think part of it is the fact that the SMWS has kind of outed them as liars, because they claim in a lot of their marketing material that they only ever fill sherry casks. But this is a second fill ex-bourbon barrel, so explain that. One of the things that really jumped out to me in the taste notes was wasabi peas. Also tatami mats, because that's just really bizarre. For those not familiar with Japanese culture much, tatami mats, you might have seen them around. Those are the perfectly square straw mats that you'll see in Japanese houses and temples and other places in Japan. They're very, very traditional. And they're actually a specific size. You will measure spaces in the amount of tatami mats that they take up. One of the places I visited, I think it was on Miyajima Island, was Lord Nobunaga's House of 1,000 Tatami Mats, which was just a giant sort of, I guess the old Japanese equivalent of a mansion in a sense. It doesn't really look like what we think of as a mansion, but very, very large hall space. Yeah, it's definitely a spicy kind of wasabi. Maybe mustard is more. I mean, I think most wasabi that we get here isn't really wasabi anyway. It's more of that, just straight horseradish and mustard flavor. But it's got that sort of vegetal heat, which is, I think, what's coming through there. I would say more veg-centric than fruit-centric. It's not overly sweet to my palate. It's sweet for a vegetable or savory for a fruit, I would say. I'm thinking more honey roast parsnips than I am mango, personally, right now. But yeah. Yeah, lovely. So, what is distillery number one? What is this distillery that does not like to be named? Like Voldemort, isn't it? It's Glenfarclas, of course it is. Everyone knows it's Glenfarclas. We love a good Glenfarclas. And Glenfarclas needs all the support it can get right now because it's still recovering financially from a terrible theft that happened about a year ago. If you didn't hear on the whiskey news, about $250,000 worth of whiskey was stolen from their display at their distillery. I think it was a collection of their family casks, which is super sad because they're completely irreplaceable. Right? That was an archive of their work, which is now. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they ever found it. Maybe they did. I might go and just look that up. Actually, I'm quite intrigued. But yeah, poor Glenfarclas. That's terrible news. But yeah, I mean, they're a great distillery. They're still family owned. I do love a good Glenfarclas. But to be honest, more and more through these SMWS releases, I'm discovering that I think I might prefer Glenfarclas when it's in a bourbon cask. It actually has this really unique distillate, which I think they rely too heavily on sherry casks, and I think they need to let their distillate shine a bit more. I like the bourbon cask Glenfarclas, and I think they do well to release it themselves. My former co-presenter and good friend Emily DeCourt always can. She says she can sniff out her Glenfarclas. It always has a very distinctive schnoz, I think she calls it, or something. The Glenfarclas schnoz. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it is quite distinctive, and I think it's showcased better in a bourbon cask, personally. I really like this. There are going to be many that disagree with me, I'm sure of that, and that's the beautiful thing about whiskey. We're all right, because we're all in charge of our own preferences. All right. Very good, very good. It is available right now, and there is one bottle available right now, I think, $189.48 at stratliquor.com/SMWS. And if it is sold out there, always worth checking at smws.ca to see if any of our partner stores, any of our friends elsewhere in Canada have it. Shout out to our partner stores that might be stocking this. Legacy over in Vancouver, of course. And then further afield, we've got Keg and Cork in Edmonton, Kensington Wine Market in Calgary. And we've also now got Arc in Kelowna, who are stocking some SMWS as well. So check out Arc in Kelowna if you're in that neck of the woods. Next up on the palette, we've got a sticky sweet spicy treat. Ooh. Fresh and highly volatile aromas lifted green grass and malted cereal notes above banana skins, stone fruits, and dessert wine, whilst cask jar and peppermint suggested rye whiskey. The palate, however, was abound with juicy fruits of orange satsumas, with sticky sweet butterscotch, caramel, and pain au chocolat with dill, sage, and cloves. Water brought out a light raisin note of Pedro Jimenez sherry, alongside toasted oat, star anise, and cinnamon mixed with melted butter. Flavours now embraced fudge, custard, and banoffee pie with nutmeg and coriander, within creamy textures and a return to menthol on the finish. After spending 11 years in an ex-bourbon barrel, this was transferred to a heavily toasted second fill hogshead for the remainder of its maturation. Now, this is a absolutely delightful single grain whiskey. It is G10.41. It's from the Lowlands. So yeah, ex-bourbon barrel to start, finished in a HTMC hogshead, 16 years aged, which is interesting for a grain. I feel like you often see grain either really young or really old, so it's kind of cool to see a teenage grain. It's distilled on the 12th of July 2005. An outturn of only 106 bottles, which makes me wonder if maybe this was used for an advent calendar or something, because that's a particularly low outturn for a HTMC hogshead. It's about a third of what you'd expect, and an ABV of 60.1, so quite high ABV as well. I love this whiskey. I love this whiskey because it gives you flavors that you would not necessarily expect, and it's a really interesting distillate as well. That Pedro Jimenez sherry flavor, definitely there for me, despite the fact that it's never seen a sherry cask. And I find that very intriguing. So, what makes grain whiskey different to single malt? Well, it's not made of malted barley, or rather, it's not made entirely of malted barley. I believe in Scotland you have to have some malted barley in the mix to be called a whiskey. So it's definitely. Yeah, it's definitely a different beast than a single malt, but in no way lesser. And interestingly enough, the first whiskey we had today, I said, was a Ballantine's whiskey. This is also a distillery that is owned by Pernod Ricard. It's a Ballantine's ingredient that, again, doesn't really have its own spotlight as much. And I don't believe it's ever been released as an official single grain whiskey. That very few grain whiskeys have. But it's delightful. We've had a lot of American tourists in the last little while asking about Pappy, which, to be brutally honest, I've had a couple of Pappy Van Winkles, and to me, it's just hot corn juice with pencil shavings. I don't get the hype. I know it's rare, and most of the people that are buying it probably aren't actually drinking it. And I get that. It's like an art piece, but I don't understand it. If you want a really good wheated whiskey that is over 10 years old, you don't want it to be in a virgin cask. You need it to be in a lighter cask, right? A virgin oak cask for 16 years would be, well, like I said, hot corn juice and pencil shavings. It's just too much flavor. It's going to overpower that distillate. You need something a little bit more delicate. I think a more delicate approach is better when it comes to that kind of grain whiskey. This doesn't have any corn. This is just wheat and barley, from what I understand. But similar kind of idea in my head. And this, to me, is a much better execution of an old grain whiskey than an old bourbon would be. It's beautiful. Herbal. That menthol note definitely comes through. A lot of people think grain whiskey is more linear, going to be more simple, less complex. Not always the case, especially I find with wheat-based ones. And this has a lot going on. It's got a lot of those notes that you can only really usually find in distillate and not in cask. It's a lot of those herbal, spicy notes. Dill. I mean, Tom and Vi Vanderroot always could pick up a grain whiskey when they came to the tastings by noting that slight dill note to it, which they think is a marker of a single grain whiskey, and is definitely present in here. Even the SMWS agrees with that. It's real good. It's real good. Juicy fruits, peppermint, cask char, yeah. And that PX note is very strange, because like I said, it's never touched a Pedro Jimenez cask, it's never touched any kind of sherry cask, but it definitely has that like funky, dark raisin thing going on, just for a moment. It's a fleeting PX influence. Lovely. So G10, so G for grain. So this is the 10th grain distillery that the SMWS is bottled from. And it's one it's got an interesting background because it was built and designed not for whiskey, but actually to make neutral grain spirit for gin. But they discovered that the spirit was so good that it deserved to be whiskey. Sorry, gin, you don't get this spirit. They decided to use it for whiskey, and it just makes an incredible single grain around which blends such as Ballantine's can be built. I really like it. It's Strathclyde. It's from Glasgow. It's a Glaswegian whiskey. Yeah, it's delightful. And if you see the picture that I just put up, I find it very interesting that this is probably one of the most industrial-looking distilleries in Scotland. Yeah, that is a particularly beautiful picture of it. I'll put it up again. I find that really weirdly beautifully taken. It's one of my favorite photos I've seen of a Scottish distillery. Cool. So interestingly, this one did sell out or the allocation from the Outturn preview tasting did all sell out, but 2 people didn't come and pick it up before the deadline. So again, their mistake can be your benefit. We have, I believe, 3 bottles of this, if I'm correct, unless one of them came and maybe Brett went easy on them and let them have it a day late or something. But to the best of my knowledge right now, there's 3 bottles available, which is great. They're fantastic whiskey, as I said. And those are available for $214.70. 214.70. Get them while you can at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society page at the strathalliquor.com website, strathalliquor.com/SMWS. All right. Whiskey number 4 today changes faster than a chameleon. A fascinating aroma awaited us each time we went back. It changed. So to mention just a few: aniseed, Himalayan salt, lemongrass essential oil, seaside swimming pool, Mary Rose sauce, and extra virgin rapeseed oil. The taste neat ranged from cough mixture over salted caramel lime chocolate to crispy squid and prawns in sweet chili sauce. The addition of water released scent of cranberry pistachio, white chocolate bark with sea salt, as well as arugula salad with olive oil, lemon and parmesan cheese, before on the palate, yet again, multifarious flavors of green tea, herbal liqueur, vegetable tempura with a soy dipping sauce, and freshly foraged sea greens. Yeah, that's a little bit of everything, isn't it? All right, what is this wonderful mixture of flavors? Well, it is a Distillery 93 rare release. 1,460 of these were released, so it's definitely not a single cask, probably 4 or 5. It's an 8-year-old from Campbellton, celebrating the Campbellton Malts Festival of 2022. Yeah, so that's something the SMWS has been doing. I think they started in 2022. Instead of doing single casks for the festivals around Scotland, so that the whole world can enjoy the same experience together, they've started doing a single malt. So it's not a blended malt; it's just a blend of a few casks from the same distillery. So it's still a single malt, but not a single cask. So we all get the same experience together. It's 59.7. And I've got more information that isn't on the label in the book. It is a first fill ex-bourbon barrel. They're all first fill ex-bourbon barrels, rather. The youngest cask in the mix was distilled on the 11th of September 2013. So, a little extra information that isn't on the label on this one. Let's see what we're in for. This was particularly popular. We saved a couple, 2, maybe 3, because we actually got 2 cases of this one. But yeah, this is a wildly popular release at the Outturn tasting last week, because it's just so weird. And that is the flavor profile that is most associated with Campbellton these days. It's just weird, little all over the place, a bit of an identity crisis. It's but it is fantastic at the same time. The it's a funny thing. Like I like consistency in whiskey sometimes. I like knowing what to expect, but I also like being taken by surprise. And the only consistent thing about this distillery is the quality. The flavor is wildly all over the place. I've never had a single cask from these guys that tastes anything like another single cask from these guys. Their marker is weirdness, right? You know how some distilleries have a certain flavor that you can pick them up by. Royal Brackler, for some reason, is cucumber for me. If it tastes like cucumber, it's probably a Royal Brackler. These guys, if I think, hey, that's a weird whiskey, it's probably a Glen Scotia. Oh, yeah, this is a Glen Scotia, by the way. Just kind of revealed that by accident. Yeah. What am I getting right now? Pineapple chunks soaked in red wine. A porcelain ashtray drying in a Mediterranean sun. Actually, that just sparked another thing. So where that came from was my time in Malta. My parents had a timeshare there. They got tricked into buying a timeshare. It was great though. went every February to Malta, and you'd always have those old school porcelain cigarette ashtrays on the metal tables outside in the sun, just baking in the sun in the Mediterranean heat. One of the other things is, you always get this plastic container of ketchup out there that's just left outside. And like the amount of times that I've put ketchup on my fries in Malta and realized that the ketchup has started to ferment, I think. It's just like slightly alcoholic ketchup. It's weird how often that's happened. Yeah, say slightly like alcoholic ketchup. Yeah, it's a whole orchestra of weirdness. It's not your normal orchestra. There's no violins, and there's no standard instruments. Instead of a violin, you've got an accordion, just for fun. Instead of the whole woodwind section, you've just got one drunk guy with a harmonica. And the music's actually pretty good. It comes out together, but it's just unexpected. There's no percussion section. There's not someone there with the big drums that they use in orchestras. There's just a guy with a baked bean can just smacking it with a wooden spoon, and it's great. It's just a wonderfully orchestrated mess of flavors, and I love it. It's a bit like the way that Marvel's going right now. If you're a fan of the Marvel superhero movies and the whole multiverse of things, it's not quite what you'd expect, but it works. Glory be. All right, so this whiskey is available right now. At least a couple of bottles, I think 3. Strataliquor.com/SMWS for $198.17. So you can take part in the Campbellton Festival of Malts for just $200. It's damn sight cheaper than going there in person, I'll tell you that. The jet lag's not as bad either. All right, the next whiskey is a particularly strange one. This is One Fancies a Sherry. On the nose, we discovered 2 sides of a coin, one being dark chocolate cherry liqueurs. Whilst flipping it over, there was a funky scent of roasted beetroot and goat cheese tart. Massive on the palate, a creamy spiced jalapeno jam next to toasted flaked almonds and a coffee bitterness in the finish. Diluted, an apple and cinnamon turnover, prune juice, and on the other side, mushroom pie and tar. Whilst taste, hoisin sauce, ginger cake, and glacé cherries. After 11 years in an ex-bourbon hogshead, we transferred this into a first fill barrique from a privately owned small bodega, now in its 9th generation, that focuses exclusively on the Pedro Jimenez grape. This, ladies and gentlemen, is One Fancies a Sherry, bottled in celebration of Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Cheers to Her Majesty. This is 108.58, one of 224 bottles, bottled at 55 ABV. This is really interesting because the Queen's Jubilee happened pretty much exactly a year ago. I was actually in the UK for it. Kind of happenstantially, to be honest, but it was kind of cool. And obviously, since then, we have a new monarch. The Queen has passed away, and her son, King Charles, is now the monarch of the UK and, well, Canada and Australia and New Zealand and many other places. It's it feels kind of odd to be now having this release that was for such a jubilant occasion in the UK. I don't know if anyone over here in Canada tuned into the celebrations that they had, but I think despite anyone's thoughts on the necessity or not of a monarchy in the modern era, and there's arguments either way, and I get that. The Queen herself was just an outstanding public servant, carried herself with great decorum for her 60-year reign. And I think acknowledging her not necessarily as a monarch, but as a person is deeply important. And she's historic, let's face it. Like, I can't imagine there's ever going to be another monarch of the UK who's going to reign for as long as she did, or who was so beloved by the populace as she was. She came into power at a time where the UK kind of needed a figurehead that everyone could just kind of appreciate. After two pretty big wars, the whole country needed to come together and needed a reason to celebrate. And the original coronation, from all accounts of people that I know that were there for it, was such a massive event that really tied together communities and had a knock-on effect for many, many years to come. So I mean, cheers to the Queen. I'm going to pour myself a glass and raise a glass to Her Majesty. She was an incredible woman. To Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. That smells amazing. And it's no secret that Elizabeth loved Scotland, loved Scottish culture. She spent as much time as she possibly could in Edinburgh. She really appreciated Scottish culture and knew her place within it as well. She never tried to really try and dictate Scottish politics. She tried to stay out of it as much as possible. She knew that she was controversial up there, but she had a deep appreciation for the people. And I think, for the most part, the people of Scotland had a deep appreciation for that as well. This smells incredible. It tastes incredible. I know that. I had it on Sunday. This is a really interesting whiskey to choose to celebrate Queen Elizabeth. It's a distillery that was actually founded during her reign, which I don't know if that was on purpose, but I think that's a pretty cool touch. And one thing about this distillery, I also didn't notice how weirdly almost iron brew orange this was. But one interesting thing about this distillery, it was actually founded specifically to be able to be run by one person. And I think one of the things that has often been said about monarchy is that it's a very lonely position, especially after the passing of her husband. I think Elizabeth felt like she was the only person for a while there, and I think there's some poetic choice there as well. Oh, that's glorious, isn't it? One fancies a sherry. I couldn't find any accounts of the Queen drinking sherry. I don't think that was really her drink of choice. But it feels like it should be, doesn't it? I'm sure she probably enjoyed a sherry or two on occasion. It is that sweet and savory. It does remind me a lot of Asian cuisine, which comes up a lot in the tasting notes, but it has that sort of sweet and savory mix. It's kind of nutty, honey nuts. That's a thing anyway. But it's it does feel like that, as I was saying, two sides of a coin. You've got a bit of a split personality, which again, the Queen the person and the Queen the monarch, two very different things. Really interesting distillery this one is. It's one that I hadn't really paid attention to until the SMWS started bottling them not too long ago, actually. I think we received our first 108 here in Canada last year, maybe. I think maybe there were one or two before that didn't stand out, but we've had a string of really interesting ones, especially their peated ones as well. Actually, one of the peated ones is currently available in chocolate form, thanks to our partnership with local chocolatiers Uncouth. If you like chocolate and you like SMWS whiskey, well, pick up a pack of Uncouth SMWS infused chocolates here at the Strath. It's Altavania. So it was founded in 1975. It was a Seagram's whiskey as well. I think at the time Seagram's was still a Canadian company. It's now owned by Pernod Ricard. A lot of Pernod Ricard whiskies this Outturn. I didn't really notice that. But it closed down in 2003 and reopened in 2005, and since then they have actually started. To build their brand as a single malt. You can see Alta on the supermarket shelves in the UK. I haven't seen it internationally yet. I'm sure it'll come eventually. They don't quite have their branding down. They seem to claim to be the first Speyside distillery to ever use peat, which is categorically incorrect. But despite that, good whiskey. Well, we only have one bottle of this, as you can imagine. It was quite popular. Sherried whiskey in general is quite popular, and paying tribute to the Queen is also quite a popular thing here in Victoria, BC. So if you are interested in this, there's one available, and it's probably going to go pretty quickly after that 10 o'clock launch. It is $237.30 is the price. At strathlegger.com/SMWS. And we roll on to our final whiskey of the Outturn. There's only 6. We're into the summer period now, so 6 new whiskies this month. This is from Coast to Kiln. The aroma for this one was typical and excellent. Heather flowers, aniseed, herbal cough syrup, and mineral oils. Also, wee touches of beach pebble, burlap, and coal tar soap. Coastal and superbly fresh. With water we found acrylics, some emergent sharp smokiness, chalk, beach foam, and bonfire embers. In the mouth, peat arrives much more clearly with immediate notes of kiln smoke, malt vinegar, seawater, and olives and brine. Some soft, heathery peat and olive oil. Reduction brought dried herbs, smouldering beechwood, hot smoked salmon, and a sharp tang of seawater. At 6 years of age, we combined select casks from the same distillery. We then returned that single malt into a variety of different casks to develop further. This is one of those casks. Back in the day, and still used by some people, this would be referred to as a marrying cask, where you would make a single malt and then you would marry those whiskies together in a cask to fully combine. And it's a very old school practice. The reason that it's been done this time, I can only assume, is contractual obligation. I assume distillery number 4 said, hey, we can sell you some whiskey, but you're not allowed to use it as a single cask. Probably because they actually have their own series of single casks that they offer to stores around the world, and they didn't want to cannibalize their own sales. So the SMWS said, yeah, sure. And then put it back into a single cask and release that single cask. So it's from a single cask, but it's not a single cask whiskey. Got it? Good. Right. I'm a fan of this one. I'm a fan of this distillery. And this is a sister cask to several that we've had already. And unlike the other sister cask that we had at the beginning of this tasting, this one is much more in line with what you'd expect. Lightly peated, nice sort of heathery smoke. Oh yeah, yeah. That's quite beautiful. There's heather, lemon peel. Those pink wafer biscuits. That's not really a thing here, but in the UK, there's these pink wafer biscuits. They're pink for no particular reason. Some people call them flamingo biscuits. It's just like wafer with a little bit of cream in the middle. It's almost like, imagine a Twix without the chocolate, and pink for no particular reason. A chocolateless Twix. No, not Twix. Kit Kat. Kit Kat without the chocolate. It's like a Kit Kat without the chocolate, and yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very familiar on the nose. It really is. It's a Highland Park. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Number 4. A lot of members will know that that's a Highland Park, and it's a distillery that announced a while ago that they weren't going to be selling single casks anymore to independent bottlers, and everyone was very upset. Turns out they decided they apparently were. They just were to stop people from selling it as single casks themselves. Or maybe the SMWS found a loophole or found some other third market. I'm not entirely sure what the story is, but it's a limited quantity of indie Highland Parks from now on. Those classic semi-coastal peat notes. It's not as seafoody and seaweed ridden as an Islay, but it's also not as pure and wood smoke and bacon as a Highland. It's somewhere in between those two things. Yeah, herbal, lemon peel, but not lemon juice. It's not particularly acidic. It's not tart. It's got that nice citric bitterness to it, which mingles really well with the smoke. It's not overly bitter. It doesn't feel like I'm chewing on pencil shavings or anything. It's a pleasant fruity bitterness, not a artificial bitterness. 10 is a good age for a Highland Park as well, I feel. Very nice. Right, well, if you are interested in this whiskey, we have one bottle left. First come, first served. Best of luck. Head to strathliquor.com/SMWS. It is $199.91. Yeah, for those of you who might be watching this video who aren't SMWS members, well, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. If you're interested in joining, all you need to do if you haven't been a member before is simply buy a bottle that's $180 or more, and it will include a trial year membership. Your first year is on us, basically. Try before you buy. See if the club's a good fit for you, and if it is, you can carry on your membership after that. Yeah. I recommend giving it a try. We have tastings here. We have a new suite of whiskies once a month. We do tastings. Sometimes we only have one. Sometimes we have 2 or 3, depending on the time of year. And I'm always happy to have a chat with you if you come into the store. Maybe even I'll find a couple of open bottles somewhere as well, and we'll fit you with the perfect whiskey to start your SMWS journey. Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you next month. It's despite the summer weather, we're not slowing down with whiskey. We've got some incredible things happening here at the Strath over the next couple of months. We're about to launch a new single cask. We've got an indie showcase tasting. We've got a Canada Day tasting, and of course SMWS every month. And next month's a particularly special one. We're releasing an SMWS Canada exclusive with some special artwork. Keep an eye out for that one. Sounds magnificent. I haven't tried it yet, obviously, but it sounds great. Looks fantastic. I have seen the label, and I can't wait to share it with you all. Tickets are available right now for our next Outturn tastings. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you there. Slán Sivar. Good night.
Folks out here are kind, let me sleep all day. They don't seem to mind, I'm dreaming my life away. There's traffic jams near the hay, have to leave here soon. Sing our songs and go to the light of a lonely moon. And it seems like I'll miss autumn in Edinburgh. That's the one I should have spent with you, with the rain lashing down, the fog on the meadows as the festival lights, as the festival lights go down. Been wandering round this town, trying to pass some time. Seems I know these streets as well as I know mine. Clock is turned to 5, perhaps you'll soon be home. I'll call and say I'm missing you, and then hang up the phone. And it seems like I'll miss autumn in Edinburgh. That's the one I should have spent with you, with the rain lashing down, the fog on the meadows as the festival lights, as the festival lights go down. Everybody's written a song, they said you've been on the road so long. The folks out here are kind, let me sleep all day. They don't seem to mind, I'm dreaming my life away. There's traffic jams near the hay, we'll have to leave here soon. Sing our songs and go to the light of a lowland moon. And it seems like I'll miss autumn in Edinburgh. That's the one I should have spent with you, with the rain lashing down, the fog on the meadows as the festival lights, as the festival lights go dim. Everybody's written a song. He says you've been on the road so long. As the festival lights, as the